from a date palm specifically. The lulav has to be used before the leaves begin to open.
The lulav has to be straight, should be straight, and the color of a lulav should be a greenish color, as different than the esrog, which should be yellow. And the critical part is the spine, the leaf that goes all the way up to the top, that this one should be completely closed. Right in the middle, there's a small little split.
That's not good.
No, it's not good. It should be entirely closed. Although many opinions hold that it is fit to be used at this point because it's not split all the way down, but I would not like to give this to a customer of mine. I would like him to have one that's entirely closed.
The second of the species is called the hadas, or myrtle branch.
From a distance, it looks like a regular set of hedges that you find down the street. But what's unique about these hadassim, this myrtle branch, is that every one of these, where the leaves are coming out from, there's going to be 3 leaves coming from the same spot around.
If they are on different levels, that's not a kosher myrtle branch. The third species, which is part of the lulav combo, is the arava, or willow branch. The willow branch has 2 leaves coming out on each level. What's most important about the arava is that the top leaf be complete, be there, not have fallen off. The arava should also have the leaves completely on its stem. That's the beauty of an arava. If the leaves have begun to dry up or the leaves have fallen off, that isn't a preferred arava.
So it should be taken care of in a proper way that it doesn't lose the leaves. Now, there are many different ways. Everyone will tell you another method how they take care of it. But
I've seen paper towels wrapped around.
Right. Some will use paper towels. Some would put a damp towel, wrap it around in that. I actually leave it open in a Ziploc bag, especially for the lulav, and it stays fresh a whole Sukkot.
2 interesting explanations about the 4 species. The etrog has a nice taste and a nice smell. The lulav comes from a date palm, which has a very beautiful taste, a very delicious taste, the dates, but there's no smell to the date or to the branches and so on. The hadas has a beautiful smell, but there's nothing to eat. There's no taste involved. And the arava, the willow, has no smell and no taste. This, our sages tell us, represents 4 different types of Jews. There are Jews which are scholarly and study Torah, and they also are very much involved in the performance of good deeds, mitzvot and good deeds. There are Jews which are scholarly, but they don't participate enough in the doing of good deeds. There are other Jews which are into doing nice things and good things for people, but they don't study Torah. And then there are Jews which are uninvolved in any way. They don't do Torah, they don't study Torah, they don't do mitzvot.
They represent all types of Jewish people.
All the Jews are invited on Sukkot.
Definitely. They're all invited on Sukkot. And not only are they invited on Sukkot during the festival of Sukkot, but if a person was to take a lulav without one of these species, they didn't fulfill the obligation whatsoever. It could be the most learned person. If he doesn't have in mind the Jew that doesn't do mitzvot and doesn't learn Torah, the mitzvah that he did is nothing. So we have to keep in mind that every single Jew is important to us, and we're really one whole unit.
The binding of the lulav. There are 2 ways in which the Jewish community puts together the 3 species of the lulav. Some use a holder made of lulav leaves, and 3 hadassim are put into the right-hand pocket, and 2 aravot are put into the left-hand pocket, and these are tied to the lulav. The Chabad custom is that we take at least 3 hadassim and 2 willow branches. We do not use more than 2 willow branches and 1 lulav.
The way this is put together, one on both sides, then we put together with it, we try to put the hadassim next to it, that ravot are inside, the hadassim are next to from the outside, and the other one on top of it, and when it's pulled together, we are actually seeing the hadassim from the outside. We could find our ravot. They're there, but they're like hidden.
We take 2 rings and tie them around the body of the lulav, and then 3 rings are used to bind the other 2 species to the lulav.
So now we have them all together. What do we do?
And then once we have that, when we have that all together, then we make the blessing.
Blessed are you, God, our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his mitzvot and commanded us on the taking of a lulav, and we shake the lulav.
We take with the stem at the bottom, and that will be to the top. Right. When we actually make the blessing is made with the lulav in the right hand, the esrog in the left hand, and it's separated. They're not touching together. When we finish the blessing, we put them both together, and we bring it to our heart. And then we go 3 times to the right. 3 times to the left. 3 times to the front. 3 times to the top. 3 times down. 3 times to the back.
I'm Shoshana Israel, and that's how we do it.
I thought down that we begin putting together the sukkah on Matzah sukkahs. So, although it might not be that practical.
Have you ever wondered why we move from our comfortable homes to our temporary huts in our backyard? The sukkah. This is how we do it.
It says in the Torah that you should sit in the sukkah for 7 days. What happens was, we all know the story of the Israelites leaving the Exodus and going into the desert and wandering for 40 years. And what we want to do is commemorate that wandering and talk about how they were really in temporary habitation. Although they were there for 40 years, they were never really sure how long they were going to be at one spot or another, and they were always ready to go to move whenever Hashem would tell them that it's time for them to move. So we reenact that. We want to really bring ourselves and make ourselves feel as they did. So we build a temporary dwelling next to our own homes, and we spend as much time as we can in it for the 7 days of Sukkot.
What does one do in a sukkah?
I would think that for me there's 3 basic things. You eat some more, and then you eat again. It's basically, a lot of it is eating and entertaining. I mean, what's amazing is that in my particular sukkah, I built it, as I mentioned, from the wood. Our table is a picnic table I built a few years ago, but you sort of transform it with the white tablecloth and everything, and you have the candlesticks. So you light the candles. It's made into something spiritual, and then you spend as much time and you entertain, and you really have guests over. So that really is the thrust of it, is to spend as much time and really to entertain. So whether you're eating, whether you're making kiddush, you have the whole meal, birkat hamazon. It's really transforming it into something very, very special.
The mitzvah of Sukkot is primarily for men. Men are obligated to eat in the sukkah. Women, of course, participate in the mitzvah just as they do in every other mitzvah, but they are not strictly obligated to eat in the sukkah. When we eat in the sukkah, we recite the blessing, "Blessed are you, God, our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his mitzvot and commanded us to dwell in the sukkah." There are many that have the custom not to eat anything at all out of the sukkah. Even a drink of water should not be taken out of the sukkah. However, the halacha, the law is that eating a meal which consists of either bread or any other grain-based food must be taken in the sukkah. Otherwise, it can be eaten out of the sukkah as well. Or wine. Wine also must be drunk only in the sukkah. On Chol Hamoed, the intermediate days, if one wants to take a trip, they have this new pop-up sukkah You can have it in your car, take it out of the trunk. In 20 seconds, you've got your finished sukkah with a mat of schach on the roof, and you're ready to go. Many people attach their sukkah to the home, to the house. And since you have a little bit of an overhang from the roof usually hangs over past the wall, you will have a small area in your sukkah that you should not be eating underneath. You should eat outside the overhang of the roof. The mitzvah of eating the sukkah is for 7 days. For 7 days, whenever we eat in the sukkah. However, on the first night and on the second night of Sukkot, it is an obligation that one must go into the sukkah to eat at least an ounce of bread or challah. When one is in discomfort from sitting in the sukkah, like if it's pouring rain, one is not obligated to sit in the sukkah, to eat in the sukkah at that moment. However, there are many traditions that we still spend time in the sukkah. A little bit of rain will not harm anyone. The law does say that one should sleep in the sukkah. However, many, if not most, of the Jewish traditions are that we do not sleep in the sukkah.
I've never done it really because of the climate that we live in, but it is done in more temperate areas. But for sure, meals, entertaining, it's just the place to be. And it's great is that you start off with some, at least with me, some sheets of plywood that are really quite mundane, and you build it into something that's quite spiritual that you really can enjoy, and it becomes a part of your home.
Many have the custom to decorate the sukkah with all types of different decorations. Children draw pictures or make different macrames and different types of decorations for the sukkah, while others have the custom not to decorate the sukkah because the sukkah in itself is the beauty of the mitzvah.
They feel that the sukkah itself has enough inherent, let's say, transcendental value that they don't really want to put anything on it. But my tradition is actually to put decorations on. So like anything else now, you can go into the store and buy decorations. When I was growing up, the vast majority was a lot more popular than is you would get Rosh Hashanah cards that you would actually put on the walls, and that's what I remember growing up. Now, you can, as you can see on the walls here, we have some laminated different decorations that are related to the holiday. I try not to put up too much because, like anything else, you can verge into the area of tackiness if there's too much. I have a good friend, and what he does is there's 7 different species that are important, such as wheat and barley and dates and figs and pomegranates and olives. And what he'll do is he'll actually take the real things and he'll hang those 7 real ones from his the top of his sukkah. So it actually looks quite nice.
This is Esther Ben-Bihi, and that's how we do the sukkah.
Okay, so what we're going to do today is go through a little bit the history of the esrog, where it comes from, the different strains of esrogs, esrogim.
Israel is the land of happiness. It is indeed one of the happiest countries in the world. Year in and year out, according to all types of international indexes, Israel ranks as one of the happiest countries in the world. And indeed, a new study of the Central Bureau of Statistics in Israel, which came out just before Rosh Hashanah, found that a whopping 89%, almost 9 of every 10 Israelis, is happy or very happy with their lives in Israel. What is the secret to the sense of happiness and fulfillment with all the challenges in the land that people feel in Israel? And I believe it is deeply connected to the festival of Sukkot. We know that Sukkot, which one feels tremendously all over Israel with the Arba mini markets of the 4 species and Sukkot everywhere, is all about Simcha. Happiness and Simcha is emphasized in this festival more than any other. But there is a remarkable halacha, which to my mind highlights an incredible distinction between life in the diaspora and life in the land of Israel. After all, says the Ramah, Rav Moshe Ishlis, the great posek, he wonders why it is that the entire year in Ashkenazi communities outside of Israel, everywhere, the Kohanim do not bless the people. The only time they bless the people is indeed on the festivals. Whereas in Israel, the Kohanim bless, do Birkat Kohanim every single day. And says the Ramah, he says, you know what the answer is? He says, because in Chutz La'aretz there's a certain happiness, simcha missing. And a Kohen has to be in a state of simcha to bless. And therefore, only through the happiness and the simcha of Yontif, which exists and pervades the environment, only then can one do Birkat Kohanim. And this boggles the mind. The Ramah is implying that around the world there is not simcha. Jews are not in a state of simcha only on the festival, which has intrinsic simcha. Yet in Israel there is a state of intrinsic simcha every day. Hence one can do Birkat Kohanim every day. And I believe the issue is this, that in Israel it's not that necessarily the individual person is more happy than Jews around the world. There are many very happy Jews all over the world, and there are people in Israel who are not so happy. That's not the issue. Rather, the issue is that the connection between the Jewish people and the land of Israel is one of a sense of deep belonging, a sense of fulfillment, a sense of somehow deeply connected, living in the presence of Hashem. Just like in the sukkah, when one goes into the sukkah, the happiness is being in the presence of Hashem, tzilad de'me'amnuta, the sukkah of faith, in the presence of Hashem. So too in the land of Israel, the land that it says, Hashem Elokecha doreshota, that Hashem seeks out the land, tamid eina Hashem Elokecha ba, that somehow Hashem's Shechina is felt in this land, and therefore when one lives in the land of Israel as a collective and as an individual, there is a sense of a deep fulfillment of what Jewish destiny is all about, basking, as it were, in Hashem's presence. May we all in Israel and around the world, Bezrat Hashem, have a Chag Sameach, and wherever we are, deepen our connection to the Sukkah, to the land of Israel, because after all, the sense of simcha and fulfillment are deeply related to these two beautiful mitzvot. Chag Sameach.
I want to talk a little bit about Sukkot and about Zman Simchaseinu and many of the things that we've been doing and why it is we do it and what the significance is and so on and so forth. So first of all, we all went through a Yom Kippur. I shouldn't say went through Yom Kippur. It gives it too much of a negative sound. We didn't go through Yom Kippur. We enjoyed Yom Kippur. We were cleansed on Yom Kippur. We had the privilege of having Yom Kippur, fasting on Yom Kippur. We didn't go through Yom Kippur. Going through it is like saying you're going through the dating process. That's something you go through. We enjoyed Yom Kippur. We were cleansed by Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a privilege for us, and we emerge cleansed. And one of the halacha is that you have to believe that Yom Kippur is a kapora in order to get the kapora. In order for Yom Kippur to be a kapora, it's a kapora. So once Yom Kippur is over, we then get busy with the preparations for Sukkot, and now we go into Sukkot. So everybody knows that Sukkot is a commemoration of the Anonei HaKovod. Now the Anonei HaKovod in the desert, Chazal say, the Medrash says that the Jewish people in the desert, what did they do for clothing? 40 years in the desert, and they're wearing the same clothing. And there's an opinion the Medrash says the clothing grew with them, because after all, there's no, where are you going to buy? Jews hadn't opened their clothing shops yet, so where are you going to buy clothing out in the desert? So the Medrash says that the clothing actually grew on them, and their clothing was pressed by the Anonei HaKavod, the clouds of glory. The clouds of glory that we commemorate with the Sukkah actually pressed clean the clothing of the Jews who were in the desert. So one of the commentaries points out that idea of pressing clean, there's a statement in the Talmud that says a person's garments should always be clean. At a basic level that means he should be presentable and be a mensch. Now a person shouldn't walk around with stained, being frum. Some people think frum means unkempt. That's not what frum means. Frum does not mean being unkempt. To the contrary, frum means being kempt. I don't know if there's such a word that there is now. Frum is kempt, right? And then we'll find out one day mysteriously that they're even the same gematria. But frum does not mean being unkempt. Unkempt is a distorted understanding of what it means to be frum. We are meant to be clean, neat, tidy. We're not supposed to be flashy. We're not supposed to, you are allowed to wear any color clothing you want when one becomes frum. You could wear any shade of black you want. There are no limitations. And so the Jewish people in the desert, the question is what are they going to do to press their clothing? So it says the clouds press their clothing clean. So the Gemara says a person's clothing should always be clean. And the commentators explain clothing is a symbol of your external behavior. Your behavior should always be clean. A person should be clean, refined, and sinless. And therefore what the clouds of glory did is that the clouds of glory actually press the clothing. Symbolically, that means that when we come out of the Yom Kippur, we go into the clouds of glory, which now are pressing our sins clean. We have been cleansed, and now the clouds of glory are pressing, they're completing the process, which we'll speak about in a moment. That's what's going on. That's what's going on Sukkot. Now, probably the first and most eye-catching feature, I say eye-catching, but I hope it's only in the symbolic vein. Eye-catching as in a lulav is very eye-catching, and just hope it doesn't catch you in the eye when you're walking doing Hoshanas. When you walk around the bima, never walk behind a little kid with a lulav. That is a big piece of strategy, number one, because the tip of his lulav is right around where your eye opens, and therefore, hopefully it's only eye-catching. It shouldn't be too eye-catching. So the lulav and the esrog, if you'll notice, you know, we have a lulav and you have an esrog, and it's one of the things that puzzles those outside of Judaism why it is we have to pay $50 or $60 or $70 for a lemon, for a piece of fruit, you know, an expensive piece of fruit which you can't even eat. And yet we take these four species and we put them together and we hold the four species. Now the four species have two significant symbolisms that we want to speak about. The first is, you'll notice everything about Sukkot is like we're in the great outdoors. Isn't it interesting? You go outside the house, you're in a sukkah, the thing, according to halacha, the most important feature of the sukkah is the schach. You can have, the schach is the covering on top, which has to come from something which was once a growing being. The lulav and the esrog and the hadassim and the aravos, they are growing beings. And what we're doing is, right after Yom Kippur, if you're like most people, you probably promised God a whole lot of things. On Yom Kippur, we decided we're going to be so good, and we're never going to talk Lashon Hara again in our life. We will never say anything inappropriate. We will only speak Aramaic, and we will only be good to people, and we will look around to help people. We're going to be wonderful and terrific. And we promised God the moon, and we're going to even treat our family members well as well. And we promised God everything, even the difficult things. Then after Yom Kippur, it's more of a sense of relief. Good, it's all over. I got 364 days till I got to do this again, and let's go celebrate. That's something more or less the way the process works. So you come to a sukkah, and sukkah is there to remind you, hey, you just made a commitment. You just made a commitment. You just had a Yom Kippur. Surround yourself with plant life. Schach on top, you've got a lulav and an esrog around you, you may have a lulav poking you from the back, and realize that everything around us is telling us one word: grow. You made a commitment on Yom Kippur to grow. Here's the reminder at Sukkot: grow. You made that commitment. And if we made the commitment, we need something to remind us. That's what happens with commitments in life. Often a person makes a commitment and very quickly forgets about it. The Torah tells you, you know what you have to do? Make the commitment, stick to the commitment. In your moment of inspiration, make sure you follow it with a tangible action. You know, there was once a group of guys, Israeli soldiers, were taken by the military. They were taken to the Panovich Yeshiva. The Panovich Yeshiva is one of the biggest yeshivas in the world. There's, you've heard of Lakewood, the Yeshiva, the Mir Yeshiva, the Panovich Yeshiva, and Or Sameach, which are probably the four biggest yeshivas in the world. And the military, they took a group of soldiers to see the Panovich Yeshiva, because the standard secular Jew has an idea when you hear the word yeshiva. Those of you who've you remember your first time in a yeshiva. When you hear the word yeshiva, first of all, when you hear the word yeshiva, you know I'm from Chicago, because most people pronounce it yeshiva. Right, so that's incorrect. It's yeshiva. And they took this group of soldiers. When you hear the word yeshiva, many people think of a monastery. That's what people think a yeshiva is. A yeshiva is a quiet, dark place with kind of damp walls and candles burning on the side, and a bunch of weird people in black walking the hallways, just going ooh, like that. That's what people think. That's the impression. So other than the black, everything else is completely different. The yeshiva is vibrant. The yeshiva is alive. The yeshiva is cooking. And the bigger the yeshiva, the more energy there is. So they took a group of people, took a group of soldiers to the Panovich, secular Israeli soldiers. They took them to the Panovich Yeshiva. Panovich Yeshiva, you walk into the Beis Medrash, I don't know how many people are there, maybe 600, 700, 800 people learning in the Beis Medrash, and the energy is palpable. When you walk in, you cannot, no matter how many times you go in there, it's booming. It's the exact opposite. It's the exact opposite of a library. It's booming. The energy takes you. So they took these soldiers in, and one of the soldiers was standing there mesmerized. And he's just looking around, taking in the sights. People are arguing over a Gemara like they want to clobber each other. And there are people walking around and they're chanting it. And he couldn't believe it. And he sees a little old man in the corner of the base vendors, and he walks over to him and says, can I ask you, how long have you been here? So the man says, about 40 years. So he says, 40 years? Are you still making progress? So he says, yeah, Baruch Hashem, a little bit of progress every day. I grow a little bit every day. It turned out that the man was Rav Shach Zatzal, who was the leader of the Rosh Yeshiva of the Panovich Yeshiva, and the leader of the Torah generation. So he happened to pick the right wrong person or the wrong right person. Because Rav Shach, with all his 90 or 100 years, and 50 or 40 or 50 years they'd been in Panovich, Rav Shach's attitude was, yeah, but every day's a new day and every day's a day to grow. And that's what the real success, the real secret, the real reminder of the Daled Minim, the four species, and the Sukkah is a reminder for us to grow. That's idea number one. Idea number two, I'll tell you a personal story. I'm not proud of it. It's just something that happened, and there's a Musar lesson to learn. And many hundreds of years ago, I was visiting in the United States, and I was watching a football game. Now, you know that the professional football, I was in somebody's house, and they had a TV on. We're going back way back to the 1700s, and they had the TV on, and I hadn't seen a football game for a long time. So I walked into the, I went into to watch the game. I think, if I remember correctly, Cleveland was playing, so they were losing, obviously. And then somebody scored a touchdown. Now, everybody knows that there is very little that is, it's good. There's very little that is as significant to an American male as another American male with a helmet scoring a touchdown. And the fans went wild. And I was watching the game, and the fans started going berserk. So the camera then does a zoom in on the fans and starts panning through the stands and is zooming in on close-ups on all the fans. And I'm sitting there, I was watching the game, I was eating some chicken, drinking Coke. He zooms in on everybody, and all of a sudden I see a creature. He has like different colored hair. I remember it was like orange and purple hair. He had a beer in one hand, another in the other, a third in his mouth, and he had no shirt, and he was standing up, and he was kind of chunky, and he was shaking wildly. Because obviously, this was important. Somebody just scored a touchdown. I remember my blood ran cold in my veins when I saw this, because I suddenly had the very unpleasant thought, and I had been enjoying the game up till then, and I had this very unpleasant thought: how can he and I possibly have a common interest? It's a very unpleasant thought, because here he was, or here it was. And he was shaking and excited, and I was trying to restrain my excitement, but I was also enjoying it. And I just thought to myself, how could he and I possibly be getting excited about the same thing? And I would like to tell you, gentlemen, I was so disgusted, I slammed off the TV and I stormed out of the room. I would like to tell you that. I didn't. I stayed and I watched the end of the game. I would very much like to tell you that. I should have, but I did not, because I was too interested in the game. But I learned an important Musar lesson. You see, part of the idea here is that on Sukkot, we have the schach is up there, and the schach is meant to block out the sun. And you're not allowed to have too much sunlight coming in. Not allowed to have too much sunlight coming into the sukkah, and you have to have more shade than sun. Now, there's the whole idea, obviously, to more shade than sun, because you're going to be uncomfortable to have too much sunlight coming in. We want to make it shady. There's always going to be a deeper reason. There's got to be a deeper reason. And one of the reasons that the commentators explain is, the Jewish people count a lunar year. We count by the moon. The non-Jewish world, Esav, counts a solar year. And therefore what we're doing is, we are trying as hard as we can to protect ourselves from the society around us. The society around us, which is represented by Esav, is a society that, whether we like it or not, influences us. So it doesn't mean that you can't watch a football game, and it doesn't mean that you can't, paint, and it doesn't mean that you can't play music. It doesn't mean that you cannot involve yourself in any of the pleasures of life. But there's a line between involvement and involvement as a result of the influence of the world around us. And we, whether we like it or not, the Rambam says man is influenced by his environment. In the world at large, they know that. That's why when you walk into a casino, the tables in a casino are usually green or blue, because they know green or blue are very relaxing color. Not that I've ever been there, but the green or blue are relaxing colors, and that if you lose $5,000, you'll just laugh and say, and then you'll throw down another few chips, as opposed to if they were red, and you'd have croupiers splattered all over the floor because people are getting upset. And they know that. And if you walk into a supermarket, they know to play that relaxing music that's going to get you to take 4 of whatever it is that you came in to buy, one of. And they even know, which is totally unfair, they pump in smells and through the ventilations in the supermarket. There are actually smells and flavorings that they pump in. They probably got some guy in an office with a camera, and he sees you, and then he says, okay, he just hit the chocolate aisle. Let's go heavy on the chocolate now. Boom. And the guy's piling chocolate, even non-kosher ones, into his thing because they're hitting. So we are very much influenced by our environment, and unfortunately the world around us influences us. And what we do, right after Yom Kippur, we go into a sukkah, and more than anything else, we want to try to create a protection for us that will help us to rise above the influences around us. That's the basic idea. Now, let's take this a little further. In Chicago, not Chicago, it's Chicago, where we drink pop on the roof, right? That's what we do in Chicago. We go to yeshiva and drink pop on the roof in Chicago. And in Chicago, there was a Jew who decided to build a sukkah. Well, you've heard all the legends and stories about Jews with sukkahs. There's the famous story about the guy who wanted to build a sukkah, and his neighbor objected, so he went to court. In the court, he asked the judge, all right, it's an illegal structure, and he said to the judge, all right, just give me 8 days and I'll take it down. Right? And he got away with this sukkah. A very famous story. So in Chicago, they had a guy wanted to build a sukkah in there's a very Jewish housing area in Chicago called Winston Towers, and he decided to build a sukkah in the parking lot. So, of course, an old lady came out and she objected. And for Shtetzach, the old lady was Jewish. They're the biggest objectors. And this old lady said, no, I'm sorry, you're not going to build a sukkah here. You're a bunch of primitives. The religious are primitives, and we're not going to have that here and get that structure down, or else I'm going to call the city authorities, which she did. And the city authorities in Chicago came, and they said to him, sorry, sir, you cannot build a sukkah. You cannot build a structure in the yard. Okay, this is a man who gave up easily. So he went to a truck rental company, and he rented a flatbed truck. And he drove his flatbed truck into the parking lot, and he parked it in the parking lot, which is perfectly legal. You can park a truck in the parking lot, and then he built a sukkah on top of the flatbed truck. So the sukkah was not in the parking lot, and he had a Zman Simchasenu. It was I don't know about her, but he certainly had a day of celebration, a week of celebration. So she objected. So I'm wondering, what was she really objecting to? What was bothering her? Something's obviously bothering her. What's really bothering her? So, you always have at a superficial level, Jews are bothered by other Jews because they remind them of themselves, and deep down inside, or maybe not so deep down inside, they realize they should be doing the same thing, and you become their conscience. Many Jews, if they involved any religion other than Judaism, they would respect it. Yeah, sure, go build a hut for whatever your religion is. If you want to eat wafers, that's fine too. Anything you want to do, as long as it has nothing to do with Judaism. The minute it's Judaism, it's very threatening to people, and therefore they object to it, which is true. I think there's a deeper reason. And let's try to understand what that is, because I think that affects every one of us. It's an important lesson for us to take out of sukkahs. One of the halachas, one of the laws regarding a sukkah, is that the sukkah has to be what's called a diras arai. You know what a diras arai? A diras arai means it is a non-permanent structure. The sukkah has to be a non-permanent structure. Even if the walls are permanent, but where the schach is, it has to be a non-permanent structure. You cannot nail down the schach. It has to be what's called arai. It has to be a non-permanent structure. One of the reasons why it has to be a non-permanent structure, there's an idea over here, that sukkahs coming after Yom Kippur, and we mentioned that it's the idea of growth. How does a person grow in this world? One of the reminders for growth in this world is a person realizes this world is temporary. Part of our joy, what are we so happy about? Zman Simchasenu, and we're spending money and you're having a feast every day. What are we so happy about? Zman Simchasenu means that we're rejoicing in a sukkah which is temporary, because it reminds us that life is temporary. You go into any tavern and make an announcement, hey guys, life is temporary. Yell it out loud. What do you think there? Oh, good. That's the best news we've heard all day. I don't think so. Most people, if you'd say that, well, this is going to go on forever and ever, they'd be much happier. To go into a tavern, to go into any secular establishment and say, this is temporary, is the most depressing thing a person could hear. Yet we go out into a temporary structure, and the temporary structure is to remind us that this world is temporary. And therefore we're going to celebrate. Now, what kind of celebration is it? Why would you celebrate? So, part of the idea is that just imagine, there are many different examples, but, the average lifespan is 70 years. 70 years. In Bigvuros, Shmonim Shana, if a person really carries on, it's to 80 years. Sometimes a person could go longer. Statistically, women live longer than men, by the way. Why that is, we don't know. And if it's a good thing or not, we don't know. But we only know that women live longer than men. And we also know statistically that married men live longer than single men. Married men live longer than single men, but statistics also show that married men are more willing to die. So again, why that is and should it be, whether it's a good thing or not, I'm not saying. I'm only telling you what the statistics show. So the average lifespan between 70 and 80 years. Now 70 to 80 years is not a long time. And we're going to go out there and go into a sukkah and say, okay, clock's running out on you. Oh, good, pass another piece of beef, will you? I'm just so happy to hear that. Well, what does that mean? So the answer is, you see, just imagine, there are many, many different examples, but just imagine a woman who goes into a clothing store. We'll take this for example. The way men shop for clothing, women shop for clothing is different. It certainly should be different. For men, they go in and buy a suit. It usually takes about 20 minutes. And that's only because for 10 minutes they met a friend and they were schmoozing for a while. So, it doesn't take that. A woman goes into a clothing shop, it could be a lifetime process. And so a woman goes in and there are thousands of different outfits and she's going to have to choose one. And she's walking around for hour after hour after hour, and her husband's with her. He made the fatal mistake of going shopping with her. And finally her husband takes a timer. And he says to her, Louise, listen. And he sets the timer for 15 minutes and he puts it down. And he says, when this rings, we're leaving the store. Zman simchasenu. And he puts it down, right? What's the simcha over there? Okay, because you got 50 minutes. The answer is, there's a reason why it's a simcha. It's a simcha because it forces you to choose a direction and to choose a result. Pick where you're trying to get to and start moving in on your goal. That's why it's a zman simchasenu. The world, let me tell you a Gemara, very interesting Gemara, and I think that this Gemara, we've mentioned it in the Shiurim here. I think many of you have heard it, but it's a Gemara that is so poignant, and it touches human nature. I don't know anybody who hears this Gemara who doesn't feel that the Gemara is talking directly to him. The Gemara says, it's a Gemara in Sukkah, Daf Nun Beis, the Gemara says, what's going to be in the future? What's going to be the ultimate fate of the evil inclination? Where is the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, where is he going to end up? What's going to happen to the Yetzer Hara, the evil one? So the Gemara says in the future, God is going to shecht, he's going to slaughter the evil inclination. God's going to shecht the Yetzer Hara. And the Gemara says, everybody is going to stand around and cry. The tzaddikim are going to cry, the righteous are going to cry, and the Rishonim, the sinners, are going to cry. Everybody's going to stand around to cry in the future when God slaughters the Yetzer Hara. So the commentaries ask, why are they crying? The Gemara says, because the tzaddikim, they take a look at the Yetzer Hara and they say that the Yetzer Hara looks like a mountain. They say this is a mountain, the Yetzer Hara, and when they think back to the difficulty that to overcome the ordeals that the Yetzer Hara presented, they cry when they think of the pain of the effort that it took to overcome the Yetzer Hara. They see this mountain, and they overcame the mountain, and they cry when they think of the pain of coming over the mountain, overcoming the mountain. If you ever saw somebody, imagine you stay up 3 days and nights studying for an exam, and then you finally get your test paper back, and even if you got an A, you just put your head down on the table, you start crying. Because you start thinking of the pain that went into it, what the energy that was invested into studying for that exam. The Rishonim, the sinners, they also start crying. Because they take a look and they say, hey, this thin strand of hair, a wisp of hair. And we tripped on it, we stumbled time after time. And when they think about we couldn't overcome that. A thin strand of hair tripped us up. They cry the pain of regret. So one of the commentaries asked the obvious question, well, make up your mind. Is the evil inclination, is he a mountain? Or is the evil inclination a thin strand of hair? What is it? I mean, how could he appear to two people as two different things? So the Mefarshim say, the commentaries say, you see, the evil inclination is different things to different people. A tzaddik, what is a tzaddik? Who is a tzaddik? Some we always hear about, he's a tzaddik, because he's got a long white beard and he's a tzaddik. What is a tzaddik? A tzaddik is somebody who overcomes the Yetzer Hara. He overcomes his evil inclination more often than he fails. That's a tzaddik. A rasha is somebody who goes in the opposite direction. Now, every experience you think of in life, and I'm going to give you a couple practical examples in a moment, and I think that this applies to every single one of us sitting here in this room, in this base medrash. Every experience in life has two stages. There's the imagination stage and there's the reality stage. If you've ever been away from home for a long time, imagine you've been away from home for a long time, 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, been in college, in yeshiva, wherever you've been, and you decide to go home and visit. So you get on the plane and the pilot announces, okay, we're going to be landing soon. So you put on your seatbelt and your heart starts fluttering, right? Oh, soon the family is going to be together. We're all going to see each other. This is going to be unbelievable. And we are going to be together and so happy. And it's going to be, and your heart is just, you have this picture of, the whole family just sitting around the campfire, and everybody's talking and getting along, and then you get in the car, your parents pick you up at the airport, and everybody's on their best behavior for about 10 minutes. Then your father starts telling the same jokes, your mother starts nudging you. By the time you get home, you're ready to turn around and go right back to the airport and come right back where you came from. Because in the imagination stage, it was going to be unbelievable, and it was for about 5 minutes. For 5 minutes, it was unbelievable. Then after 10 minutes, it became unbelievably bad, and you decide, time to turn around and go back. All of life's experiences, or most of life's experiences, are like that. You stop and think, we just passed Yom Kippur. Where was your head about, let's give you 15 or 20 minutes before Yom Kippur ended, okay? Ne'ilah, and the, what do you call it, we're in a spiritual high like Malachim, we're angels, and we're Shema Yisrael, and Baruch Shem, and Hashem Hu Elokim, and we're unbelievable Madrega. Then we start davening Marv. Sorry, they blow the shofar, which takes about 10 seconds. Then they daven Marv, which usually takes less on Motzei Yom Kippur. Okay, so now, where are you during that Marv? I mean, honestly, and where were you during various parts of the day on Yom Kippur? There's, what am I going to break my fast on? I'm going to knock down a bottle of Pepsi in 2 gulps, and I'm going to have a banana barge, with 7 scoops of ice cream that if you finish it in 41 seconds, you get another one free. And you got all these grand plans for what it's going to be after Yom Kippur, and how many slices of pizza can I wedge together, and open my mouth like a cobra, and try to get it in. And then what happens is, most of Yom Kippur, you have 3 bites of a sandwich, you have 2 sips of Coke, and it was good, it was okay. You have a slice of pizza, it was good, it just was not what it was cracked up to be in my imagination. In my imagination, it was far, far superior to anything that I could have possibly had in this world, particularly some of the pizza around here. It didn't compare. And it happens in all areas of life. That the imagination creates a mountain of pleasure in our mind, and the reality leaves us disappointed. It never matches, or rarely matches up to the imagination. I heard once about a couple. Anybody's ever gone traveling? You ever go travel vacations? People spend, you go travel. Let's go traveling. And talk to people when they travel. So a lot of people travel, they come in, it was unbelievable. They have to be able to tell you it's unbelievable because they don't want to look too foolish for having spent all that money on something that wasn't unbelievable. But ask the people in a moment of truth. Fill out a form without putting on your name. How was your vacation? It was okay. The accommodations weren't what they were, it looked much better in the pictures. And the food certainly looked better in the pictures. It was kind of boring, and I didn't expect, or these guys go mountain climbing and, through the forests and through the jungles, they put on their boots and now they're G.I. Joe or Rambo and they go traveling through, and it looks so good, but you never dreamt when you were going traveling. Nobody imagines losing their baggage. And nobody imagines that their tent gets blown away at night out in the forest or in the woods. And nobody imagines being chased around a tree by a grizzly bear out in the wild. Nobody imagines. The imagination stage is not there. The imagination stage is just right. We're going to go marching through the rugged frontier, and we're going to catch some sort of kosher shechted cow and roast it on the fire. That's what we're imagining. Well, it doesn't work that way. In the imagination stage, it does. In reality, it doesn't. A tzaddik is somebody who sees a mountain of pleasure. There's a mountain of pleasure lurking. All of a sudden you see, wow, look at that. That must be, to indulge. It must be unbelievable. And the tzaddik overcomes his impulse. He overcomes his base tendencies. And he does not indulge, whether it's his eyes or whether it's his appetites. He doesn't indulge. And he walks away with an imagination of pleasure. There's an imaginary pleasure that he overcame. So what does he feel? The pain that he feels is, I just gave up a mountain of pleasure. What about the sinner? The sinner sees the same mountain and he indulges. What does he walk away with? That little strand, that nothing, that emptiness, that's what tripped me up. That's why it looks like two different things to different people. People have a different perspective. There's the perspective in the imagination stage. There's the perspective when you hit the reality stage. And the reality stage is often very unpleasant. Because the person says, I am so weak. For that I gave in. I could not overcome. For that I indulge. That's the difference between the tzaddik and the rasha. We're the world at large is trapped in a world of illusion. The world's living in a world of illusion. And one of the illusions in the world is that people, for some reason, people think that they are going to live indefinitely. And often people know intellectually, there's something called death. But it usually happens to other people. Right? Proof is that this guy's still alive. And a person has to confront his own mortality. It's a very unpleasant thought for a person who has no goals and has no direction. When I was back in the day when I first got married, my wife and I were driving from Chicago to Columbus, Ohio. Any of you who are from the United States, Chicago is here and Columbus here. Any of you are not from the United States, you should be. But Chicago is here, and Columbus, Ohio is about over here. And we had to leave Chicago to drive to Columbus. And as I was leaving Chicago, you got about a 16-lane super highway on the way out of Chicago. And my dad gave me instructions how to get out, how to catch I-70 to go to Columbus. So as you leave Chicago, you drive for about 20 minutes and you hit this massive 16-lane interchange. And he was telling me something about, you got to catch the third lane on the right and make a quick left and then get into the center lane and back into the right. And he gave me this whole direction. He said to me, you got it? And I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure. We both knew I didn't. So we got in the car. It was late at night and we started driving. It's about a 7-hour drive to Columbus. So we started getting in the car. We started driving. And as I hit that 16-road interstage, I had that sinking feeling. The kind of feeling you get when you walk out of a test and you think, I think I could have done okay, but I'm not sure. You're pretty sure. You didn't. And I had that sinking feeling that, all right, let's drive. We're young and foolish. We kept on driving. Drove for I'd say about 2 hours, maybe an hour and a half. And all of a sudden my wife says, I just saw a sign that says we're headed for Detroit. Now that's not good because Chicago's here, Columbus is here, and Detroit is here. And I said to her, it can't be. And 10 minutes later confirmed my fears of reality. And there was a sign that said Detroit, 235 miles, which is a place I wanted to avoid for several reasons. And so I didn't know what to do, and I pulled off the road, and I pulled into a truck stop. So I pull in, and there's a lady working behind the counter at midnight in a truck stop, so you can imagine what she was like. And I come walking in, and I guess I look sort of Jewish. And I come walking in, and I say to her, excuse me, can you tell me how to get to Columbus, Ohio? So she calls out, Roy! And Roy comes in. Roy is a trucker who looks just like Roy should look, and just like you imagine Roy would look. And he looks like he stepped right off the cover of Truckers Magazine. And Roy has, he's got a Marlboro in one hand, the beer in the other, and doesn't look doesn't look like a Harvard grad. And Roy comes over, and she says, Roy, can you tell this guy how to get to Columbus? So Roy looks at it and says, well, where are you coming from? So I said, Chicago. He goes, Chicago? Boy, are you messed up, right? And Roy started laughing, right? And then Roy called all the other truckers. They're all named Roy, by the way. Roy! And he calls in, hey, this guy coming from Chicago, boy, he messed up. And I didn't find anything amusing about it under the circumstances. And I certainly didn't want to end up between two slices of bread and have one of them consume me. So we decided to leave as fast as possible. And I learned an important lesson, which is what we started speaking about. You better know where you're going, and you better know how to get there. And if you don't, then you're going to end up Boy, you messed up. And that's exactly what the world is trapped in illusion. Watch people. I mean, I was thinking about, you see people are chasing something where if you try to pin them down, they will not be able to tell you what it is they're tracing, where it is that they're going, which lends to so much unhappiness. Because the person can't tell you, where am I trying to get to? Try to pin somebody down. I once heard a politician say, they were arguing about some politicians, well, for the better advancement of society. So this is a politician, so obviously you're never going to get a straight answer. But I would like to ask this politician, to advance society to where? Where are you trying to advance to, and how do you know when you got there? Because nobody will answer that question for you, because nobody could answer that question. Nobody knows. That's why a diras arai, a temporary dwelling that reminds us that this world is temporary, that temporary dwelling is for us a source of simcha, because it gives us focus and it gives us direction in life. And Zman Simchaseinu says, on the one hand, grow, on the other hand, it's arai, it's temporary. There is no choice but to grow, because that's the purpose of life. When a person fulfills his purpose and senses in his neshama, his soul, that he's fulfilling his purpose, there is no greater joy, no greater sense of satisfaction than that. There's a halacha. The Torah says that you're not allowed to build steps leading up to the altar. The Mizbeach, you cannot build steps. You have to build a ramp that leads up to the top of the altar. What's the idea? What's the difference if it's a ramp or it's steps? So the basic idea is that steps, the Torah says itself, the Kohen is wearing a garment, and his garment, he's got under clothing on. Yet, if he extends his legs on the steps, so then that is disrespectful to the steps, because it exposes him, so to speak. Even though it's not literal exposure, he is exposed in a disrespectful way. And therefore, he should have a ramp, where on the ramp, he does not have to extend his legs the same way that he would extend them on the stone steps of the altar. That's the basic idea. That's what the Torah itself says. Rashi points out on the spot in Chumash, Rashi says there are two reasons why. There's a very important reason over here. Rashi says, if a person has to be sensitive to steps, so then imagine if you're going to be sensitive to steps, stones, which are inanimate. So imagine how sensitive you will be to your fellow man who does care about his dignity and about being insulted and degraded. If stones, which are not alive, we have to be sensitive to not this degrade them. So imagine how sensitive we'll be if we practice, so to speak, on the stones, how careful we have to be when it comes to the dignity and the respect of your fellow person. Every person you ever meet in your life, you will hear a voice. He's got a little voice coming out of him. Every person, if you lean closely, every person has a voice that is saying, please respect me. Please respect me. Everybody wants to be respected. And the Torah is telling you, you got to be sensitive to people. People are around you, and if you have to be sensitive, that's what the Torah is teaching us with the Mizbeach. So, there's a famous story, Rabbi Akiva Eger. Rabbi Akiva Eger was the great Talmudic commentary who, if you read his commentary, was fluent in Shas. He knew Shas, like we know Shema Yisrael. And Rabbi Akiva Eger once had a guest at his house for Pesach. Many of you have probably heard the story, but it's worth internalizing the lesson. Rabbi Akiva Eger had his guest at his house for Pesach, and they were sitting there, and the guest spilled his wine. I don't know if it ever happened to you, that you ever been somewhere where you spilled, where you're a guest and you spilled, but it's a very humiliating, you feel horrible. I mean, you just feel absolutely horrible. Rabbi Akiva Eger, the guest, spilled the wine, and it very selfish, it felt terrible. So Rabbi Akiva Eger waited a couple of minutes, and he very discreetly shook the table, and he spilled his own wine. And he said to the guest, I guess something must be wrong with the table. It's not your fault. Something must be wrong. The guest felt terribly, tremendously relieved. Now, can you imagine such a thing? Tell that to somebody outside, in the outside world, that if somebody ever spills in your house, you should spill also. Can you imagine such a, it's so unlikely. It's so, you spilled, clean it up. So a Rabbi Akiva Eger learns the lesson of the Mizbeach very well. I'll tell you a story that actually happened, again, it happened to me. I'm not proud of it. I'm just telling you the story. The first guest we ever had, I got married, we were living right here up behind the yeshiva in Maladafna. First guest we ever had, invited up one of my friends here from the yeshiva, and he came Friday night. We're sitting on just the three of us. I've been married 3 weeks. And the guy stabbed a piece of chicken at the table Friday night, and as he brought it towards his plate, the piece of chicken slipped off his fork and it fell on the floor. The guy bent down, he picked it up. I think he picked it up with his hand and put it back on the serving platter. You know, when you're nervous, that's when you strike out. So, I'm not sure what he may have upset the whole platter. I'm not sure exactly how it happened. And I remember, and it was very, very uncomfortable. 3 of us are sitting there, and the guy was very, very embarrassed, very nervous, very tight. And the 3 of us are just sitting there. And at a certain point, I was young at the time. Younger. And at a certain point, I remembered the Rabbi Akiva Eiger's story. Now, I remember that I was buzzing with excitement at the time. Now, that's always a dangerous thing when you're going to do a mitzvah. Most people, if you're buzzing with excitement when you're going to do a mitzvah, you got to be really, really careful. Most people are not buzzing with excitement on the way to put on their tefillin. So just be careful. If I'm going to go do a mitzvah, be careful. If there's a glint in your eye, go learn. Go learn. You're dangerous right now. So I remember I was buzzing with excitement. I remember the Rebbe Akiva Eiger story. So I decided I was going to spill my drink intentionally. And I'm telling you, the angels, the heavenly angels were surrounded me. I felt them. I felt them. The heavenly angels were around me. They were so proud of me. I was about to become one of the 36 of the generation, one of those 36 hidden tzaddikim, and some of them should remain hidden. And, every Jewish home you walk in, there's a picture on the wall, the Chazon Ish, and next to it there's the Chafetz Chaim. I already saw myself right in the middle. There's just the 3 of us on the wall. Maybe make some money out of it. And I took my drink very carefully, and I put it on the side of my plate, and it spilled. And it was unbelievable. I felt so good. I wanted to give myself a bracha. The guy was, he was instantly relieved, and we had a beautiful Suda after. It was wonderful, terrific. Then the guy leaves, and after he leaves, my wife of 3 weeks says to me, listen, Tzadikal, do me a favor. Next time you spill on yourself, okay, don't spill on me. I spilled all over my wife. Now, I guarantee you that Rabbi Akiva Eiger, when his wife got up, she was dry as a bone. Right? Because sensitivity does apply to your relatives and wives and such people. But at least we try. At least we try. Since then I haven't done it. I've only chosen careful guests. But at the end of the day, a person understands that's what the Mizbech is telling you. That's idea number 1. Sensitivity. A person has to be, by the way, there was a story in the United States. A guy told me, there's 2 people, I heard this, somebody who was in the yeshiva at the time told me, there was a boy in the yeshiva who was sliding down a banister. It happens sometimes. They had a banister on the 2nd floor of the yeshiva, and a guy comes sliding down, zipping around the banister. And, that's what banisters are for. And he comes zipping around, and as he got to the bottom of the banister, there's a little old man standing there, and he plowed into him and knocked him off his feet, which is bad. It turned out that this little elderly man was Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal, which is very bad. Rav Moshe Feinstein was the Gadol Hador, the undisputed Gadol Hador, and he just plowed over Rav Moshe Feinstein. So the Bacher didn't know what to do, and it's one of those moments of paralysis, temporary paralysis, and you just feel, so he bends down and he picks up Rav Moshe, and he wants to stammer out an apology, and before he could say anything, Rav Moshe says to him, please forgive me, I know you boys like to slide down the banister, I usually stand on the other side of the corridor, I don't know, I had a mental lapse and I was blocking the banister, please forgive me. So before the Bacher could say anything, Rav Moshe turns around and he walks away. So Bacher is left standing there, he's flabbergasted, it's ridiculous. And then the next day, he's walking in the hall of the yeshiva, Rav Moshe sees him, and Rav Moshe does like this, and he kind of calls him over. Rav Moshe didn't do like that, he never did that. Rav Moshe just went like that, and he called the boy over. So the boy figured, okay, now he's going to get the proper scolding that he deserves. And Rav Moshe calls him over, and again Rav Moshe says, please forgive me, I don't know what happened, I blocked the slide, please forgive me. Then Rav Moshe came over every day for 2 weeks, and asked the bracha for forgiveness. The bracha was going out of his mind. Says this is absolutely absurd. And Rav Moshe came over every day for 2 weeks, and he was asking the Bacher to forgive for forgiveness for him plowing him over. So he didn't know what to do. He went to the mashgiach of the yeshiva, the spiritual advisor of Michal Birnbaum Zatzal, and he said, what do I do? Rav Moshe keeps apologizing for me knocking him off his feet. What do I do? So Michal Birnbaum said, go to Rav Moshe in his office and ask him for a bracha. He'll give you a bracha. After he gives you the bracha, he'll feel that he will have atoned for his grievous misdeed, and then he won't apologize anymore. So the Bacher went the next day, and he asked Rav Moshe for a bracha, and Rav Moshe gave him the bracha, and then no longer apologized after that. Okay, that was the end of the story. Now, first of all, you should know all the lies you hear about Rav Moshe Feinstein are true. This, just when you think that you've heard it all, there's another one coming, and they were all true, because Rav Moshe was just beyond anything we could possibly imagine. And I'm wondering to myself, I don't know if all the details are true, but the stories are certainly true. And I was wondering to myself, what was Rav Moshe thinking? Was Rav Moshe really think it was his fault for blocking a slide where the Bocher shouldn't be sliding down a banister in Yeshiva to begin with? What was Rav Moshe really thinking? And the only conclusion I could come to is that Rav Moshe was probably thinking that, if this Bocher dwells on the fact for a moment that he just bowled over the Godel Hador, that's something that's not going to be easy to get over. And Rav Moshe, before giving the Bocher an opportunity to think about it, Rav Moshe springs up and he apologizes. It's not your fault. Don't absorb any of it. Don't internalize it. It's my fault. It's not your fault. Very little doubt in my mind that that's what Rav Moshe was thinking. That's the sensitivity that we're learning from the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach is teaching us that a person, you have to be sensitive to stones. All the more so, Rashi says, you have to be sensitive to inanimate objects, number one. Number two, there's another difference between a ramp and stones. If you have steps over here in the yeshiva, you got steps, what are the steps, about 6 inches apart, whatever they are. You walk up steps. When you walk up steps, there's one problem. You could stop. And you could stop on a step and you could stand there basically for as long as you want. On a ramp, depending on the angle of the ramp, you have no choice but to propel yourself forward. At the moment that you stop propelling yourself forward, you start to slide backwards. When you slide backwards, that means you're going down the ramp. A mizbeach, an altar, represents what we're striving for in our life. The altar in every religion always represents some sort of devotion to whoever it is that they're worshiping or should be worshiping. When we build the mizbeach is where we sacrifice, we offer, and we show our devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That ramp on the mizbeach represents a Jewish life. The Jew's life is, don't stop. Yes, you have to take level. You have to go by one level at a time, like steps. Yaakov's ladder, Jacob's ladder, is a symbol of climbing to heaven on a ladder. On the other hand, you have to keep climbing up, because if you don't propel yourself forward, you're going to slide back. Judaism is one word. Judaism is growth. Judaism is about growth. The Mizbeach is the reminder that we have to constantly grow. That's what the idea of Sukkot, the idea of the Daled Binim are. There's a story I like to tell. Some of you have probably heard it. Some of you have heard it maybe twice. But it's a remarkable Musar lesson. There was a guy walked into an automobile dealership on a Friday afternoon. And he bought a car for $50,000. And he gets into this car, and he drives straight off to a used car dealership. He goes in, says to the guy, look, I just bought this car for $50,000. It's a documented story, by the way. He says, I bought this car for $50,000. I'll sell it to you for $20,000. The guy says to him, why do you want to sell a $50,000 car for $20,000? He says, don't ask questions. You make yourself a quick 30 grand, don't ask questions. He says, I don't know, let me think about this. He walks out of the office, picks up the phone, and he calls the cops. He says, you better send somebody down here, because the guy, I don't know, something's going on. So the policeman comes down, tells him the story, walks over to the other guy, he says, then why do you want to sell a $50,000 car for $20,000? So he smiles sweetly at the cop, he says, none of your business. Policemen don't like that. Trust me, I know from personal experience, they don't like that. So the cop says to him, well, I'm going to make it my business, buddy, give me your credit card. He takes his credit card and he calls the company, but it's late Friday afternoon. The company's closed for the weekend. So he says, okay, I'm going to have to lock you up. He locks him up Saturday, Sunday. Monday morning, he calls the company. Guy's got a credit line, his card, everything's in order. Cop comes back to the cell, gives him back the credit card, he says, you're free to go. Guy says to him, thank you very much. Leaves the police station, he goes straight to an attorney's office. He files a lawsuit against the police department for false arrest. He had planned the entire thing start to finish to do something that looks questionable, that looks illegal. You could give your car away if you want. There's no law against selling your car at $30,000 discount. He did it on a Friday afternoon because he knew that the credit card company would be closed for the weekend, and he was locked up for 2 days so that he could plead emotional trauma and distress in court, documented story, and he got a settlement of $3.5 million. Right? True story. $3.5 million. You like that? Huh? You're just upset you didn't think of it first. I know. Yeah, me too. yeah. I know everybody's thinking, what could I do? You know, get me $3.5 million. Now, there's an important Musar. This is a documented story. Important Musar lesson here. Somebody were to ask you, how much is that car worth? How much is that car worth? Worth $20,000? It's worth $50,000? That car is worth $3.5 million. That's why America is called the land of opportunity, by the way. And $3.5 million for the car. That's what the car is really worth. $3.5 million. You just went through a sukkahs. You picked up a lulav and an esrog. We're in the middle. We got another day tomorrow. Hoshana Rabbah. You get to hit the aravas on the floor a few times. There's a guy who's been bothering you all week. You know, you can nab him a couple of times too. A whole week of mitzvahs. You've been in the sukkah, you've been sleeping in the sukkah, eating in the sukkah, playing chess in the sukkah, whatever you do in the sukkah. How much was it worth? How much did you get out of each mitzvah? You have any idea? You're clueless. I'm clueless. We're all clueless. You know how much a mitzvah is worth? How much was that car worth? $50,000, $20,000. The car has got a value that you cannot see on the price tag. There's a hidden value in every mitzvah that we do. I was once in a shul. There were two very wealthy men who were purchasers for a very wealthy merchandise company. And they were not, they were in shul, to their credit, they were in shul on Yontif, on Sukkot, but they did not have the Daled Minim, they didn't have the Lulav and Esrog. I had my set, and the two of them did not, they weren't, there's a limit, you drive to shul, say Yizker, and or whatever it is, you drive a little bit, but to their credit, they were in shul, but unfortunately they drove, and they were not observant. So at a certain point, one of them they were sitting in a row in front of me, multimillionaires, both of them. And one of them turns around and he says to me, "Hey, Dave, how much did you pay for that set?" So I said, $39 at the time I got the set in America. It was for $39. I said, $39. So I remember he whistled. That's pretty steep. I just remember thinking, well, steep, this is a guy who pays $39 for the entree at the restaurants that he eats in. And then I realized, well, $39, if you break it down, considering that I do it every day, that means I got one mitzvah a day out of it. That means it came out to $6 per mitzvah. That's not that cheap. That's not that expensive. $6 to pay for a mitzvah. If you realize what the reward of the mitzvah is, what the mitzvah is worth, the problem is we don't. So you have to know that an entire sukkah, you're doing mitzvahs. You've been doing mitzvahs all sukkahs. For every moment, you go to sleep in the sukkah. What better mitzvah could there possibly be? Somebody once told me about where they do scientific research. They have a sleep lab. A guy told me here that he was paid. He was paid as a volunteer to sleep. I think he had to sleep 14 or 16 hours a day. I got guys in my shear who do it, without getting paid at all, So he was paid to sleep. I mean, it's like the dream job. No pun intended. What could be better? You sleep in the sukkah. Sleep as much as you want. For every moment that you're in the sukkah, you're getting reward. Do we have any idea what we've accomplished? Do we have any idea how much that's worth? So one of the things that we understand is every time we do a mitzvah, number one, there's reward for it, and number two, we're growing as a result of it. That's what the sukkah is a reminder of. The sukkah is a reminder of us this entire period, starting from the beginning of the month of Elul, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Aseret Yemei Tshuva, Yom Kippur. 4 days in between, then Sukkot itself, and then the culmination with Hoshana Rabbah, and then Shmini Atzeres. This is all a reminder for us at the beginning of the year, grow. We made commitments. Now we have to take it with us. The most difficult thing is to take the commitments with us. There's a boy who saw Reb Shlomo Zalman Auerbach. And Chazal, the Gemara says, Ratza HaKadosh Baruch Hu l'zakos es isha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to give merit to the Jewish people. So lefichach hirba lahem Torah mitzvahs. Therefore, God gave us a lot of Torah, a lot of mitzvahs. We got a lot of mitzvahs. There are mitzvahs everywhere you go. There's a mitzvah lurking. You got to wash, and you got to bench, and you got to help somebody. And a mitzvah and stuck, and you go. Just think of how many mitzvahs you do when you go to shul in the morning. You put on your tefillin, your head tefillin, your hand tefillin. Some of them, unfortunately, it's two separate mitzvahs. You put on a talis if you wear a talis. You daven, you say Shriya Shema, Amen Yeshua. That's just in shul. You haven't even started benching and learning and doing and supporting and everything else that a person. Mitzvahs galore all over the place. Good. So the kid said to Rav Shlomo Zalman, the Gemara says that Kosh Baruch Hu wanted to give us merit, so he gave us so many mitzvahs, we could accumulate mitzvahs left, right, and center, which is true. So the kid said to Rav Shlomo Zalman, but it's so hard. If Kosh Baruch Hu wanted to help us out, he wouldn't have given us so many mitzvahs. Why did Kodesh Baruch Hu make it so difficult? We have so many mitzvahs everywhere you turn. You can never. There's always a mincha lurking. You ever notice that? Everywhere you go, you got to figure out where you're going to daven mincha. When you travel, if you go to a ball game in Camden Yards in Baltimore, they have a minyan under the stands in the 6th inning. You have a mincha minyan under the stands in the 6th inning. We were going to do it in Chicago in Wrigley Field for the Cubs, but you're not allowed to daven for a miracle, so we didn't. We cut it out. But in Camden Yards in Baltimore, they got a mincha. You got to be mincha. It probably spread to other places too. See, there's always mincha. You go out with your family to a restaurant. Sorry, got to go daven mincha. And if it's not mincha, it's ma'ariv, which is very beneficial sometimes, by the way, because if you're out with people that you don't want to be with, you just say, sorry, I got to go to ma'ariv, and I come back 2 days later, Your wife says, where were you? It was a long borchu, and you wanted to get away. So there's always a mitzvah lurking. So Shlomo Zalman said to this boy, pay attention carefully, it's such a beautiful idea. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach was one of the Gedolei Ador, 300,000 people at his funeral. There were 300,000 people at Shlomo Zalman's Levaya. And I was at the Levaya here in Eretz Yisrael. I think it was 1989 or something like that, 91. I forget what it was. Shlomo Zalman's Levaya. There were so many people there. There was a secular policeman, part of the security force. And he was looking at the masses of people there. A secular guy, and he was overheard to say, if I knew there would be this many people at my funeral, I would drop dead right now on the spot. That's how impressive it was. So Rav Shlomo Zalman said to him, let me ask you a question. When you get up in the morning, you get yourself dressed. You put on shoes? He says, yeah. He says, do you know anybody who doesn't wear shoes? He goes, no. He says, right. You put on your shoes, but you put on the right one, and you put on the left one, then you tie the left one, then you tie the right one. It's no big inconvenience. It doesn't really cost you that much. And you're being rewarded for it because you're following the halacha. Do you eat? Yeah. Do you know anybody who doesn't eat? No. So you eat, the food happens to be kosher, and you make a bracha, and now you're getting rewarded for doing what everybody else is doing. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the privilege, most of what we do in life we'd be doing anyway. There are a lot of people who help people. And we're helping because HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to help people. Lefichach hirba HaKadosh Baruch Hu hirbelem Torah mitzvahs. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to give us the zechus. That's the idea. That's what we're doing on Sukkot. Finally, there's a little girl who had certain social challenges. She was off. And, and those of you who grew up if you ever grew up in a religious neighborhood, the little kids have what's called a sukkah hop, where they go from one sukkah to the other in the neighborhood sometimes. The youth groups, they go around from one sukkah to the other. So these little girls, a bunch of little girls, 7-year-old girls, were going from one place, 9-year-old girls, they're going from one sukkah to the other in the neighborhood. They're going on what's called a sukkah hop. So they went from one sukkah to another. And, they get candy or whatever it is that happens. They walk into one sukkah, and there's a middle-aged man there, sitting in the sukkah, and strangely enough, there was nothing, and there are no pictures on the walls, there's no chains, there's no nothing dangling from the sukkah. The sukkah's bare. So this little girl, this little 9-year-old girl, she walks over to the guy, and she just looks at him, and says to him, where are your decorations? And the guy looks her in the eye, and he says to her, in my sukkah, the people are the decorations. Because every Jew is so special, they decorate my sukkah, and right now, you're decorating my sukkah. The person who told me the story said that one line from the man had a tremendous effect on the girl, and it changed her socially as a result. He said, you are the decorations in the sukkah. So, gentlemen, I want to tell you something, because I think that it's also something we have to think about on Sukkot, with this week included. I think it's very important for you to think about the fact that you are sukkah decorations. Anybody who's in this base medrash, anybody's in this base medrash tonight and is learning Torah instead of being out doing whatever they're doing, anybody who's in this yeshiva and has taken on the challenge of growing in this Yiddishkeit, anybody who's in any yeshiva, and anybody who's not in a yeshiva,
And the topic of tonight's shir is called Kol